All right, Melanie, I'm super excited for today's podcast and really looking forward to today's conversation with you.
Thank you, Victor. I'm looking forward to it also. I want to let everyone know what we do at Beck Capital Management and what we're doing with clients.
Absolutely. So I think you kind of teed us up there today, really talking about the client experience, what they can expect, the value that they can really get from a relationship with a financial advisor like yourself. And especially with someone with so much experience in the industry, you've been in financial advising for 21 years now and with Beck Capital Management for 14. So I guess lead me into a little bit of how you started getting into financial advising and what that's looked like so far in your career.
Well, I wasn't always an investment advisor. So I went through my own life transition, went through a divorce, and realized I needed to do something different. I was a teacher, and I just knew that wasn't going to be the place that I needed to stay in to raise my family. So investments were a great way, and I love educating. So everything I do when I'm working with clients, I I kind of keep that in focus. So it helps the clients, and it just feels natural to me.
I think that's awesome. I think, I've heard you talk about before how the teaching aspect of your, previous career has influenced you in your financial advising with current clients. Are there some specific takeaways as far as what your, previous career has led into, today?
I would probably say that it helps communicate clearly with clients. There's a trust factor. So I've just have that natural being able to speak with them, know where they came from, because so many clients are sitting across from you. They haven't had all of this experience. So a lot of advisors will use words that when they're articulating it, they know them, but the client is like going into your doctor's office and they're telling you something and you're like, what is this? Well, my perspective is to explain and educate again, and it helps them.
That's something that I've definitely run into with Hunter on the podcast. I think keeping the financial jargon out of it can be, difficult at times, especially given the number of acronyms and different things we use in the industry. But make simplifying it and bring it as approachable as possible to a client, I think is extremely valuable. And talking about the client relationship, I think one of the most important parts of that is that initial meeting. You're meeting someone for the first time. Maybe you met them and set up this meeting before, but this is really your first time getting to know somebody and starting to, move into that relationship where you are advisor and client. What do you think are some, important factors, and what do you kind of expect that first meeting to look like?
It's a good question. When clients are coming in, I need to get to know them. I need to know where they're at. So I always ask them to bring in some key documents. I'm maybe stuff like your current investments with your 401k. If you have IRAs, maybe you've got something held with another custodian. That gives me a clear picture. If I know what their salaries are, expenses, then I know what, some questions to ask them. I also need to know what the goals are. Are they planning for short term? Are they planning for long term? Um, Probably retirement is the biggest one. They want to know if they're on track for it. Are they saving enough? Do they need to, are they going to be fine?
Yeah, and I think those are that's so important to kind of establish that up front, because the important part of, aligning an investment philosophy with a client is really that goal based, financial planning, because it's not what we want for the investor or for the client. It's what they want their wealth to do for them.
Right.
And so strategizing and really establishing, as you're saying, those goals up front, what do you want from your wealth? Is it, hey, I want to give to charity. My goal is to, give to these philanthropies I really care about. Or is it, hey, I want to leave enough to my kids or my grandkids? Or, hey, maybe I just want to blow it all during my lifetime, but I want to make sure that I don't run out of money. I can run out of money on the very last day of my life. And so it's our job to kind of, articulate that and then transition it into an investment portfolio. So I think that's, you make a great point, starting with those goals and then establishing the investment strategy and how we're going to translate that into, hey, these are my goals and aspirations, into, hey, this is what a tangible investment portfolio looks like.
Yeah. One of the other things I need to know, and it helps when we're beginning our meeting, is to find out how comfortable they are with the markets. Some do not have a tolerance for volatility, and others have seen their family, their parents' accounts or their spouse's accounts, and they just realize we need to leave it in there. And other people, there's that first little bump in the road, and you realize, they're not so aggressive, so you can dial it back. So finding out their comfort level helps us, I guess, position the portfolio and helps them to understand why they're in what they're in and what we're trying to do and align it with them.
And I think you teed that up well for what we do uniquely as as an advisory firm, as an investment management firm, is because we talk a lot about how, we don't click the easy button when it comes to investing, and we don't when it comes to financial planning either. And that's why individuals are going to hold individual securities, individual companies as far as stocks, fixed income, alternatives in their portfolios. They're not just going to be thrown into, a basket of mutual funds, a basket of ETFs, because I think every single day we are reiterating our value to our client. This isn't a make a one-time sale and then your relationship is done. It's an ongoing, living, breathing relationship with that client. And so I think, properly articulating, as we said, those goals into that investment portfolio, but then being very prudent with our investment strategy and with that portfolio, investing in things that are going to provide the most value to the clients, extremely important.
One of the things I do let them know is that we're a fiduciary, and that helps them because as a fiduciary, we're making sure that what we have in the client's portfolio is in their best interest. And with that, it's easy for me to sit down and review with a client what they have currently. So talking about our individual securities versus someone who, when I look at their statement, may have 5 mutual funds. And I can explain to them the fees. We can go into that part. So the mutual funds, I can let them know that there's the layers of expenses, whether it's expense ratio, admin fees, 1201B marketing fees, those kind of things. Whereas when you're with our firm, we have y'all as the research team, and we're looking for those individual companies that best fit what we're trying to do for their goals. And that just really helps them understand. And so I know our sector philosophy is important versus large cap, mid cap, what clients traditionally see as similar to a pie chart. And I explained that to them, and it really helps. So knowing what our team is trying to do, I'm able to add that value with the client and educate them along those lines. And it just helps them down the road so much.
Right. And I think a lot of this is leading into, I think what we're kind of getting to is the communication factor with the client. And, being able to articulate, hey, this is what you own, why you own it. This is what we're doing from an investment strategy perspective. That, my part on the research side of things is really getting into the weeds with a lot of these investments, but then properly articulating that to you, making sure you understand it, you giving feedback back to me on the client side, so that we are able to form that portfolio as best we can. And I think relaying the message to clients about how we view the world, how we view investments. You mentioned sector rotation. We're starting with that 30,000-foot view of the world. Where's money flowing across international economies? Right. And then drilling from there, hey, which sectors of the economy are going to, be most benefited during this period? And we're going to, overweight those areas of the market because we want to achieve the best result for the client while staying within their, volatility kind of specific, goals based off of how comfortable they are with the movement of assets. They may be a little bit, more risk seeking or volatility seeking, or more, volatility averse. But it goes back to, investing in those areas of the economy that we think are going to outperform. And I think clients understand that at the end of the day, they're in the economy just as much as you and I are. Right. And so they're seeing what's going on. And when they have that articulated to them from me, from you, it really helps them throughout the investment journey. And I just don't think a lot of clients are hearing that from their advisors these days.
I absolutely agree. And another thing I let clients know is that comfort level, it can change. So the nice thing about where we're at with Beck Capital Management is I have a client who calls me. I understand that I can go to you as the research team, and we can tweak their portfolio, because now I realize, and now I've been working with them for 6 months or a year. We can just do that versus, other places you have more of that salesperson kind of that's doing it, and it's getting on with a fund manager. They're not really going to be able to tweak it, whereas we're able to go in and do that very easily at Beck Capital.
Right. And I think that's the value of, at least from our perspective of doing things in-house. Your clients can talk to me directly if they want. They can talk to you, and you actually have access to me. Whereas a lot of investment advisors, they're routing investments through some third party who they have never talked to. There's no chance the client's ever going to get to talk to them. So how are they really going to understand why their money is positioned the way that it is? And I think that's
right.
a big piece of that.
I know one of the other things I let clients know is that we are fee based, and that it's the assets under management that they're charged on, so that there's no conflict of interest, because I want their portfolio to grow and that we're all in the same place. The last thing I want it to is to go down, because then that fee is based on that. So you're aligned with the same interest versus someone who is commission based. You realize that there can be that little nudge to maybe go ahead and sell a product that they get a commission, and is that with the best interest of what the client was? So when I explain the difference to the client and educate them again, then they realize they like that so much better. And it's part of that doing what's in the client's best interest.
Right. I mean, I think it goes all back to the fiduciary responsibility, like you mentioned earlier, doing what's, in the client's best interest at all times from our, and really fulfilling our duty, for the client. Now, you mentioned earlier, you talked about people being worried about retirement. As you're having these client conversations, what are some kind of common concerns, some questions that clients have, and then maybe what are some things that clients don't necessarily think of that you like to bring up to them and in these conversations?
Well, I'll start off with the part with some of the things that clients don't think of, because they're coming, we're having to open up new accounts for them. And with that, if I look on their statement and it's an individual brokerage account and it's just titled in their name, I always let them know that they could do what we call a transfer on death or a TOD account, and they've never even heard of it. And I explained to them it is a way similar to leave to beneficiaries without having to go through probate. And who wants to go through probate, go through the courts? It saves time, money, and you know who your money is going to go to. So it's a much faster way to I guess go through the system and have clients have that peace of mind. And then I always talk to them about durable power of attorneys. There's the financial and the medical. So a lot of times, if you're a client that's in your 40s, or maybe you've gone through a transition, those things need to be changed or updated. And they really appreciate looking at that. Someone who's there, not just about the money, but putting all the pieces together and being in their corner for them.
Right. And I think that's our job. That's, a huge part of your job as an advisor is, taking that step back, looking at things very holistically, but also looking at the minutia, right? So a client's not necessarily going to think, oh yeah, I need to make sure that my account is titled properly. That's our job to make sure, hey, everything is set up for you so that in a worst case scenario type situation, you have to worry as little as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, all of these things are talking about and reiterating the value that a relationship like ours with clients, provides is that, one, we talked about the, investment management and the sophistication of that being very, conscious and prudent with the way that, we treat client assets. But then it's the advice and the things that they think about that they know to ask for. But then,
right.
You're mentioning these things that, hey, a client's not going to even know to ask for this,
mm-hmm.
but setting them up for success so that they don't have to worry about their finances, they can be as hands off as possible, I think is extremely valuable.
They appreciate it a lot. And so kind of going to that next part is, what are some of the common concerns? And it's is with the planning with retirement. One of the things I like to do is have a close relationship with a client's CPA. And the reason I do that is a lot of the clients that have worked and they've saved money and they've put it away in their 401ks and their IRAs are now having to think about that legacy part of it. And they don't always realize that if you have a qualified with a retirement and you have a non-qualified with a regular brokerage account or a tax-free account with Roth accounts, But those are three different buckets. So which bucket do you spend down first? Which ones do we take money out of? And so working with a CPA, I can help the clients realize that we should maybe take from that IRA because there's a new law, the Secure Act, that happened in 2020 that said if you're a non-spouse beneficiary, those funds have to be spent or distributed within 10 years. So if it's going to pass to your children or grandchildren, there could be huge tax implications. And who wants to pay more money after all of these years of working? You were trying to lower yourself in the tax bracket, and then now to realize, oh, there could be higher taxes on it. So clients haven't thought about that, and that's one of the things I like to do, pull in the CPA and look at it from that perspective. Another thing I like to do is with clients, well, let me first go ahead and say we'll look at doing Roth conversions. So if the money's going to need to be spent in 10 years, I start, especially if they retired, looking at those tax brackets, especially and taking the CPA and where can we take out, we can take money out of the IRA up to a certain amount, put it over into a Roth account and let it grow tax free. Then the children aren't going to have any issues with that.
Yeah, I think these tax situations are such a big part of our job. And of course, we're not CPAs, so we don't give formal tax advice, but managing an investment portfolio really goes hand in hand with the tax situation because that's where we bring in the CPA or communicate with the CPA, trying to manage that relationship and coordinate so that we don't leave our clients with a big tax bill at the end of the year, or we just help manage a special tax situation. I think the Roth example is perfect because whether you're early in your career and you're in a lower tax bracket and maybe it makes sense to go ahead and if you can still contribute to a Roth, or maybe you convert your traditional IRA into a Roth at that lower tax bracket makes sense. Or to your point, people who are maybe not yet taking Social Security, but are retired, not earning a whole lot, perfect time to convert to Roth. And I think just bringing up these strategies and ideas to clients can provide a lot of value that they may not initially think about that can yield huge benefits down the road because, we're always trying to limit the amount that we give back to Uncle Sam. And that's a huge part of the return on your investments. If you're talking about your gross return, but once you talk about it on an after-tax basis, having the right advice can make a really big difference.
It does. Some of the other things that with clients is Social Security, they start getting that. So helping them understand if you're taking the money out, is it going to affect Social Security? There's Medicare issues. So using the CPA, looking at all of those different issues, clients just appreciate it so much that if we can help them get their hard-earned dollars back to them. They also, once you reach a certain age, you have to take out your required minimum distributions, your RMDs. So one of the things that clients do not realize is that you can use a QCD, a qualified charitable donation, and it can count towards your RMD. So when clients realize, oh, I'm already gifting to my church or a charity, I did not realize, oh, I'm doing that and I'm taking out my RMDs, but they can be one and the same and part of it. And they appreciate that part. So again, adding the value, helping them understand the different things to help them save the money and their tax dollars that they've done.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that we want more dollars back in our pockets. Whether that's through a combination of the growth that you get through a portfolio or spending less on taxes, it makes a huge difference. And it's strategies like that why people come to you and seek advice. And so I also want to transition a little bit to another part of your work that you do. You're a certified divorce financial analyst. Did I get that correct? And so you work with a lot of people preparing for divorce, through divorce, post-divorce. Can you kind of talk to me a little bit about that and some of the things that you work with clients on? Because this is a huge financial situation for those folks, and I think it really, really incorporates well with what you do on the financial advising side too.
Yeah, I'd love talking about that as part of those transitions clients are going through. We also have clients who a spouse has passed away, so there's similar transitions, and none of them, it's great to have someone there. No one wants to go through those transitions, but when you're going through them, finding someone who knows what to do. So very similar to the planning. I know that clients are going to need to gather all those documents. And even when you're coming in for you're not going through a divorce and you're coming into a meeting, when I asked for those documents in the beginning, now everything's gone to the cloud. Someone doesn't have access to them. So I'm always saying you need to yearly, like, have them know where everything's at. Here's the 401k, here's the IRA, here's the bank accounts, here's the life insurance. You just kind of can go down. And what are our liabilities? The credit cards, there's the car. Certain ones have different interest rates. So explaining all of that, gathering all of it is probably the thing that is most difficult because we can't get to them, especially since we had COVID. Everything went from paper statements to cloud, which is nice, but how do we get our hands on it? So that's the first thing I do with clients. And then we have to put it together, similar on a spreadsheet, where I like to do something called projections afterwards. Because what you want to do is bring clarity and where a client understands, am I going to be okay? Because they're all scared, regardless of what they're going through. Am I going to have enough? Am I going to be okay? Those are some of the things I have clients asking about in the beginning.
Well, I think you made a great point on the first half of that is really establishing first of all, where are the assets located or the liabilities for that matter, having good, at least fundamental knowledge of your financial situation. I think sharing that between spouses as well is critically important. And I think even, going beyond that, when you're talking about a broader relationship, is sharing what's appropriate with your kids as well, because as much as you can prepare yourself as a family for any kind of big life situation, and prepare yourself in the case of, something that may be unexpected is extremely important. Hunter and I talked on a pretty recent podcast about, having that conversation with your spouse, on a regular basis, letting people know, hey, this is how you access these things. Here's our financial situation. This is where these things are held. In a situation like you're working through can really help prepare somebody, as you're going through that process and then into the preparation and kind of analysis phase that you're talking about.
It does. One of the things that I always tell clients, they do not have to be an expert. That can be one of those like financial overloads where they decide they want to be that proverbial ostrich and bury their head and just tell me when everything's done. But I try to simplify it for them. If we take the home and we take the retirement accounts and the investment accounts, everyone wants to put a number on it. But the reality is, going back to that tax situation, if you have to liquidate these assets, then what is the true value of it? And then like a light bulb comes on. What they thought was going to be a certain percentage of split in actuality is much different. And then we can, if I know what a client's post-divorce budget, and because everyone wants to, what is my spending like right now? But for you to be able to divide those assets and me to look down the road at what you're going to need after the dust is, after you sign on the dotted line, the dust is settled, what is life going to look like? Looking at it from a post-divorce situation and then taking, oh, well, you're not at retirement age. Maybe you don't want the retirement portion. Or if we do, let's tax affect it because you're going to have taxes. And if you're not 59 and a half, you're going to have an additional 10% penalty because Uncle Sam didn't want you to touch it right now. So looking at that and then doing something what I call projections. If you were to get these assets and you had this much income, and we can look 2 years down the road, 5 or 10 years down the road, are you going to fare well? Do we need to move more assets? Do we need to ask for support? What is it going to look like? Probably gives more clarity than anything else to clients. And that's what I love to be able to do, because then they're not fighting with the attorneys, going back and forth because they thought that, oh, I need to get 55%. In reality, we look at 55%. It may not be that much of a difference, and you may spend it on attorney fees in court. So when I can do anything like that, add value, bring dollars, and let's take the emotions out, let's look at it, it helps. And it's the same with our planning. That's where clients can get worried. Have I saved enough? So again, I love to do those projections with my clients, and it's something I like to do every year with them.
Yeah, and I think you put that perfectly, is the planning through a enormous life event like divorce and then the financial aspect of that really go hand in hand. And I think that's why the two, facets to your career really go well together. Being able to prepare someone for something that has been anticipated to some extent, but they don't know the implications of. You're helping, as you said, limit some of those attorney fees potentially, because I know that people who go through this situation very often see it drug out through a long process. And, helping to find an equitable, reasonable split is a huge part of that. I know that I've talked to you about cases that you've worked on before, and you do an amazing job really breaking down, articulating well the split between the assets, what's fair, what's most beneficial to, the spouse that you're working with. And so I think that's amazing. And then that can lead into, a broader financial advising situation where you can help them on an ongoing basis. And I think that's probably the next phase of that situation, is once you've really completed your job helping them through that transition, is onto the ongoing life phase. Because we see very, very typically that it's one spouse who's in charge of, the bulk of the financial situation. And then the other spouse may be left out of that and not really know how to prepare themselves or go through that life planning, that goal planning with a financial advisor. And so you being able to help someone through that final phase of that, or the ongoing phase, is a huge part as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the reasons attorneys will, now that they know about CDFAs, will send clients. It helps them in their practice because they're trying to focus on the legal part. We're trying to focus on the financial part. Plus, if you come to someone like myself, think about it. If someone brings me their statement, I can look and see if things can even be liquidated, because there could be things that are in there that are annuities. There could be that could have surrender penalties. There's going to be things like maybe there's private investments in there that can't even be liquidated. That everyone's thinking, oh, I just have a company in there, but the reality is, if you got part of that portfolio, then what is it going to look for you down the road? So then I can take all of that and start looking at the planning, because now you've divided the assets. We know which ones you should get or which ones you can't do certain things with. And then looking at your post-divorce budget, like if you were not your budget, at the assets to help for your planning. A lot of times the assets get split and clients don't move things over. So then it sits there. I think I was giving you an example of where someone had come to me and they said, oh, I've got an IRA. And I looked, and the IRA was with cash. It had never been invested, and then 10 years had gone by. And so you really have to look at, what do we want to do for you, and start working with someone. And I love doing that. And that's where the trust is built. You feel like you're helping them. And then that planning that you did with them before fits wonderfully into what you're going to do in your next phase. What we do at Beck Capital Management with the investments.
Yeah, and I think this has flowed perfectly, because we kind of came full circle here. We started with the investment management, kind of leading into that here at the end. And I think that, just kind of summarizing this conversation, I think, first of all, we talked about providing that value through a sophisticated investment management plan where you're in individual assets, you're limiting fees for the client, you're bringing those goals to life through that investment portfolio. Then we talked about the planning, right? So the known knowns, what clients know to ask for, or then maybe the known unknowns, but then also the unknown unknowns for the client, things that you are bringing to them to help them with their financial situation. And then, of course, that's where you get to be creative. You get to work through things like your divorce financial, advising practice, and, creating creative solutions, all while managing that ongoing relationship, the tax implications of that. There's a lot of interwoven facets to all of this. And so people with, complex or unique financial situations can benefit so much from working with someone like yourself.
I agree. It's been wonderful just to let everyone know what we do and how we do things. And there's a lot of communication things that we do at the firms that keep people up on what we're doing. So I love that part of it. And it just, like you said, it brings around the full circle of what we do and how we can help clients.
Definitely. Well, Melanie, thanks so much for joining me today. I enjoyed it.
I did too, Victor.